Fun fact, violence is the easiest solution to most problems. Let me say that again. Violence is the easiest solution to most problems. However, it's rarely the right solution, and it usually comes with some pretty serious consequences. Keep that in mind as we go through this, and welcome to the newest episode of SDW.
Super Dario World!
It's a me,
Dario!
Woohoo! Let's go!
Alright, as always, any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can find me at Dario the Show on Instagram or at SuperDario_World. Also, follow me on Facebook. My Facebook page is Super Dario World. I update all my podcasts there. So, what do I mean that violence is the easiest solution to most problems? Well, it's simple, and I'll give you an example. If somebody is standing in your way and you want to go through, you can push them out of the way. Problem solved, right? Violence works. However, that leads to the consequence of whatever the other person desires to do. They can turn around and push you back. They can, I don't know, maybe fall, break a hip, sue you, call the cops. Doesn't matter. The problem is you solved your immediate problem. You used violence, you push the person out of the way, not in your way anymore. Another example, if your neighbor's dog keeps pooping on your yard and you hate it, you hate that dog poop, then you can poison the dog. And problem solved. No more dog poop in your yard. However, that leads to the consequence of whatever the neighbor decides to do in retaliation. So, if you are, I'll give you another example. If you're competing for a spot on a sports team and it looks like another player might take it from you, you can take a baseball back to their knees and problem solved. He won't be able to compete against you anymore. However, that will probably lead to serious legal consequences, and you will definitely be getting kicked off of the team that you were trying to join. My point here is, and I want to make it pretty clear, and it's the one that I started out the podcast with, violence is the easiest solution to most problems. However, it's rarely the right solution, and it usually comes with serious consequences. Now, historically speaking, violence always leads to more violence. That's a fact. You conquer somebody, there's resentment. They'll try to either liberate themselves or, revolt or attack you back. It happens every single time. You have to kick somebody's ass into submission, and even still, there's always resentment, even generations later. But humans have an innate belief in retaliation. We hate it when somebody slights us. We hate it, and we will remember forever. We believe in retaliation. We believe in justice. We believe in balance. There's a reason why there's an expression, an eye for an eye, and it makes perfect sense to us. Everybody perfectly understands an eye for an eye. It makes sense. Like, you harm me, I harm you. My own mother told me if somebody ever hits me at school, I should hit them back twice as hard. That was my mother. All right, that's what I grew up with. And so there's a reason why learning to turn the other cheek is considered to be one of the most important teachings in human history. You could argue that it was one of the big changes in civilizations. You could argue it's the thing that separates a civilized person from an uncivilized person. Learning to turn the other cheek. And it's hard. It's very difficult because we have an innate desire to kick fucking back. That is what humans do. It is our nature. Now, there's a lot of things that have been happening in our society lately, and I want to address them. But first, I want you to keep something in mind, and this is something that I learned fairly recently in a conversation I had with a detective friend of mine, where I asked him about particular laws that don't really make sense to me in California, and particularly one law, and I'll give you the example. In certain parts of California, if you steal something under $950 in value, it's only considered a misdemeanor. And therefore, thieves, criminals almost always face no type of pursuit and no punishment for this crime, which to me seemed like an incentive to commit low-level crimes. So his explanation to me, because like I said, it makes no sense why anybody would allow this, why anybody would authorize that. But his explanation was, and I'm going to try to quote paraphrase him, but basically what he said is, the law works as a pendulum, right? Whenever it goes too far to one side, meaning if it goes too far on the side of crime and punishment, Politicians face backlash, and so they try to overcorrect, and you end up in the opposite extreme. It goes in a pendulum. One way, if it goes too far one way, it tries to go to the other. It happens every single time, which is where we appear to be now. We were on the opposite extreme of law and order. And so eventually, the people will get upset that the crime rates are going up, and they'll complain to the local politicians or like somebody who promises to fix the issue, and then they'll overcorrect, and we'll end up back on the other extreme. At least that's how it's worked throughout his career. That's what he explained to me. And he hopes that one day we'll end up somewhere in the middle, which sounds reasonable to me. Unless, if there's a lot of crime, go a little bit more to crime and punishment. Doesn't matter. Point is, it's not perfect. And to me, I'll never forget it. The law works in a pendulum, right? It depends on where you are. So, in other words, every single action has an equal and opposite reaction. So the overcorrection for the things that have happened in 2020 is going to be a thing to see. The overcorrection for 2020 is going to be wild. And I'll get to what I think will happen in each situation as I go through them. But what I really want to talk about is failures. Okay? The big thing that I want to talk about is failures. Failures of the present. Failures of the past. Failures of leadership. Okay? Specifically, leadership. Which has come from all sides, really, all sides. There's nobody free of blame here. I'm talking from the government to the protesters to the cops to society in general, and I'll go through them one by one. So, let's start with the easy one. Let's start with the protesters, okay? So the protester side is divided into three groups, all right? Three groups. It's the peaceful protesters, the rioters, and the looters. And it's important to keep them separate because not every protester was a part of the riot, not every rioter looted, and not every looter was a protester. So it's important to classify them, all right? So here's the classification. If you were there to voice your concerns, yell, show your support to a movement, your disdain for authority, or maybe even verbally harass some people, but didn't cause anybody any physical harm, didn't damage any property, or break any law in any way, then you fall under the category of peaceful protester. If you physically attacked people, threw items at the police, or damaged any public or private property, you fall under rioter. And congratulations, you've broken the law. Finally, if you left any of these places with any property that wasn't yours when you arrived and you did not purchase it legally, then you're a looter, and congratulations again, you also broke the law. So, as you can tell, of these three groups, one of them is moral and perfectly legal, the other two are not. So, let's start with the peaceful protesters. All right, peaceful protesters, congratulations. Your movement, your message, and your credibility has been stolen by the ugly opportunists. They're ugly opportunists that have infiltrated your group, and they have stolen everything from you. All right? If you were a protester and you did not break the law in any way during these past few days, then honestly, sincerely, you have my sympathies. You are just as much a victim of these criminals as the rest of the law-abiding citizens of your community, and your movement has probably been tarnished forever. You are forever linked, all right? Does this exempt you from any responsibility? Legally, probably. Morally, harder to say. So here's what I believe you did wrong, and I'm going to also give you some free advice, honestly. So first off, and putting aside the fact that you allowed yourself to get infiltrated by a group of thugs and would-be criminals, and gave them the perfect opportunity from which to launch an assault on a community that had nothing to do with the death of George Floyd, and who most likely agree with you on the fact that it was a horrible crime on an American citizen, your big sin here was that nobody really understands what your protest is about. You didn't have a clear message, you didn't have any solutions, you didn't have any reasonable demands, and this is a failure of leadership. I'll say it again. A failure of leadership. Pretty much everybody in America agrees with you that what happened to Floyd was horribly wrong, and that those responsible for the crimes should be punished. If it would have happened to anybody, it would have been horribly wrong. This should not happen in America, right? The police chief condemned what happened. 99.9999% of the cops in America condemned what happened and said that that's not how they're trained to subdue people. The mayor of the city in which it happened condemned it. The DA condemned it. The governor, the president of the United States. Every person on every level of government and every level of society has condemned this. The officers were fired and are being investigated. The officer who committed the crime is under arrest and will be on trial for murder. All right? We're all on the same side here. We all agree. Everybody, we're on the same side. We agree that this was horribly wrong, this should not happen, and this person should pay for his crime. But what was your leadership's message here? What was it? Who are you fighting? We're all on the same side. Who are you fighting? You want to argue that this is a systematic issue? Fine. What's your solution? What's your plan? What do you bring to the table? The most important element of any movement to be taken seriously in this world is that it needs to have a realistic and achievable plan, an achievable goal. Because guess what? Complaining without offering any types of solution is called whining. So that's something that children do. It's fine. It's not what adults do. Being upset is understandable. So is being angry, as well as being horrified, disgusted, indignant. But showing up somewhere and just yelling change accomplishes nothing. You need to have a plan. You need to have achievable solutions. You need to have a clearly identified problem. Asking to fight a systematic issue is the same as saying you want to fight the boogeyman. Give us a who, a what, a where. Be specific and we can help you. We'll fight with you. But you need to give us that. Removing bad apples from a basket is not the same as burning down the whole fucking fields. Being specific is important. Because, despite what most people think, fixing things is not easy. There's no magic wand that magically fixes a problem, any problem. And unfortunately for most of us, it's a lot easier to do harm than it is to do good. It's very easy to fuck things up. Very easy. Because actions have unintended consequences. It's called the ripple effect. Like a perfect example. You know that driving off the coyotes off of an area, and I mean the animal, the coyotes, off of a particular area causes the roadrunners to go extinct in that particular area as well. Why? Because it turns out that, in spite of what the Looney Tunes might tell you, coyotes tend to feed on the roadrunners' predators. So less coyotes means more predators for the roadrunners, ergo they go extinct in that particular area. The point here is that specific problems require specific solutions, and misdiagnosing a problem can be far worse than the problem itself. Imagine going to the doctor with headaches and him just giving you a prescription for a migraine medication because that will solve your problem quickly. However, it turns out that you had headaches because you had a brain tumor. So, in this example, going with the easy solution to the superficial problem ended up killing you. Even if it, even if it did help with your headaches for a while, right? Anyway, so what's my advice for you if you fall into the peaceful protesters category? First off, you need to distance yourself as far and fast as possible from the rioters and looters as you can. Condemn their actions. Stop providing cover for them. They are using you. And if at first you were innocent victims in all this, the longer you're linked together, the closer you are to being considered accomplices in their crimes. Second, you need damn fucking good PR. Really fucking good PR. Go help clean up the areas the looters and rioters damaged. Seriously. Show the community that this is not what you were about. That the reason you protested was because you actually cared about the community and you wanted to keep the people in that community safe. Not just see everything go set ablaze by criminals. Third, if you are in a protest, leave the second the police ask you to disperse. Or if you feel things are starting to get hairy, no, leave. Just leave. No cause is worth your life. Live to fight another day. The streets during a riot are the arena of cops and criminals. Normal rules and ordinary rights go out the fucking window here, okay? Regardless of who you think your enemy is, you don't want to face any enemy in their arena. You want to face them in the court of law where you are equal, right? That's your arena. That's where you're equal. That's where you're safe. You also run the risk of being confused with a member of either side and suffering physical harm because of it. To put it in simpler terms, if you don't want to get hit with mace in the fucking face, don't be in a place where there's people hitting people with mace on the face. On the counterpart, if you don't want to get stomped by a mob, don't go to the place where the mob is stomping on people, okay? That's simple logic. Fourth, if you are brave enough, and this, honestly, it's only if you're brave enough, and if you really want to somewhat ignore my point number 3, stand up to the rioters and looters. Stop them from hurting people and damaging property. We've seen videos of people do this, and honestly, my heart goes out to them, and because some of them really got hurt, but those are legit brave people. They're brave souls. They're people that have the courage of their convictions and real strength of character and cojones of steel. I don't know if I could have done it. Actually, probably not, because I'm a runner. But try to help the police to make arrests by giving them information of the people you know who committed crimes. Point them out, or, in the very least, don't protect them. Sometimes that's enough. Just don't get in the way. Will any of these things make up for the people who lost their jobs, businesses, their health, or in some cases their lives? No. But it's a start, and it's better than doing nothing. It also goes a long way to, like I said, show communities that your movement is about making something better, not worse. And most importantly, that you are not the enemy. Because as I mentioned before, right now everybody is linking these 3 groups together, and communities tend to look at as the enemy to look at the groups who are setting their communities on fire as the enemy. So, like I said, free advice. Take it if you want it. I don't care. Now, for the looters and rioters. Unfortunately, we're in a place and time in society where over 40 million Americans are unemployed. Most of them are young, and where most people were forced to be locked in their homes for months, and a great sense of community was lost. Young people want to be out. They want to live their lives, and they want to take risks. We're risk takers by nature, and losing your livelihoods over something that's invisible and doesn't make any sense tends to make people angry. This was a massive buildup of tension and a giant powder keg that found its spark. However, none of that is an excuse for your actions. Using the death of an innocent man as an excuse to get a new fucking TV or new shoes is beyond disgusting. Using it as an excuse to beat up old people defending their businesses, to send a man to the hospital for waving an American flag, for punting a man's skull for trying to defend somebody else, you committed an avalanche of crimes on innocent communities and law-abiding citizens, and for what? Did it make you feel better? Are you any less angry? Do you feel justified? I legitimately would like to know, because the consequences for your actions have the potential to be unfathomable. I'll break it down for you. The president has already signaled that he wants to assign Antifa, which is the group suspected to have been the leaders of some of the riots, as a domestic terrorist group. I'll say that again. A domestic terrorist group. That means the Patriot Act. That means that you don't go to jail. You go into a dark room and disappear forever, because that's what happens to terrorists in America. And that means that if you ever put a tweet on your Twitter that says you support Antifa, they could link you to a terrorist group, which means various consequences, like probably being put on a no-fly list. If you ever purchased any of Antifa's merchandise online, that means there's a digital trail to your credit cards, which means there's evidence that you funded a terrorist organization, which has various consequences, including no banks giving you any sort of credit ever. How else could you be associated to this group, you're wondering? GPS can track your cell phones, and they can verify that you were there in the areas during the riots. There's also videos from cell phones, social media posts, etc. All these things could link you forever to a terrorist group. Now, whether or not it's legal for them to assign Antifa as a terrorist group is still a matter of legal debate, but at least to me, it signals how they want to treat you. Okay, this is what they want to do with you. This is how they want to treat you, basically how they want to treat you and what their plans are for you. So even if the law doesn't work, they will or might create another that fits the bill better. So much like the Patriot Act was created after 9/11, they could create something else to attack you specifically. Remember, the pendulum will swing hard the other way, and actions have consequences. You want to know what the worst part about it all? is that you are clearly just a bunch of idiots. Claiming stupidity as a defense might just work here, because going out, committing heinous crimes, recording them, and posting them online is beyond idiotic. We're in the point in society where there are cameras pretty much everywhere. Every single business that was vandalized recorded who did it. We have videos of people who got assaulted because people were recording it. We know who assaulted a lot of them. Their faces are on the internet as we speak. As we speak. There are people online whose sole purpose right now is to identify the people who did this by their clothing. All right, so even if you were wearing a mask when you committed the crime, they'll find a picture of you somewhere else without the mask. That's their job right now. That's what they're doing. And some of them, they're doing it for fun. And you know what? They're posting their faces online for free, for fun. Your names will eventually be found out as well, by the way. Not just your face. Somebody's going to recognize your face, and your name will be out there as well. There's nowhere for you to hide anymore. And even if for some miracle the cops aren't hunting you down, the people you hurt have people who care about them as well. The community is pissed off and horrified by your actions, just as much as they were horrified by the actions of the police officer who murdered Floyd. Your faces will be forever burned into their memories. Law-abiding citizens will demand your arrest. And if they don't get it, you will be ostracized by the communities. Because guess what? Nobody wants to hire people like you. Nobody wants to work with people like you. And nobody wants people like you near them. So, my advice would be to run. But honestly, that would be of no benefit to anybody. And while I know that evil actions can never be erased, and some things can never go back to being fully fixed, some things, you can break them too far, I still wholeheartedly believe that good can still come out of something bad. So instead of running, my advice is, well, to first off, stop committing crimes. That's first and foremost. Second, be a fucking adult. Return what you stole. Beg for forgiveness. Try your best to make amends with the people you hurt. How? I don't know. Only you know how large your damage was, but try to do that. And beg for forgiveness. People make mistakes, and you made a big one. But America's really fucking forgiving if you actually show that you're repentance. You really show repentance. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. And also, it's very important. Like I said, you made a big mistake, but it's what you do next that will define you as a person. So do better. From this point forward, do better. And seriously, ask yourself, who do you want to be for the rest of your life? And can you live with yourself if you don't do the right thing now? Finally, and this is kind of the bigger one, you have to be ready to accept the consequences of your actions. Why? Because you're an adult. And as the saying goes, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. Like I said before, for many of you, it's only a matter of time. So if I was in your shoes, I would try my best to get out in front of it. If not for any sense of morality, then for a sense of self-preservation. Because as more people start to get arrested, which they will, they'll start giving up other people that are caught on tape, especially the most egregious ones, in exchange for what? Leaner sentences. So, in your shoes, I'd return everything I took, try to make amends with the people I hurt, turn myself into the police, and hope that grants me a leaner sentence before I get used as somebody else's scapegoat. But that's just me, and maybe I'm a bit paranoid, but that's what I would do. Overall, just try to do better. Be the change you want to see in the world. You can still be a net benefit to society if you give yourself the opportunity to do so, okay? Or in the very least, don't commit more acts of evil. As I've mentioned this before, sometimes that can be enough. Now, for the police. I understand that the actions of the officer that killed Floyd are horrifying, and they do not reflect the police force as a whole. Everybody's responsible for their own actions, and I've met cops who are real assholes, right? But the majority of them that I know are really nice people. The same way I've met doctors who are real assholes, and the majority I know are actually pretty nice people. I've also met accountants, truck drivers, janitors, and teachers who are total assholes. But the majority of them are really nice people. The common thread here is people are assholes. and assholes have different professions. So it's unfair to generalize any group of people for the actions of certain individuals. As a side note, I do wholeheartedly believe that police officers have a vested interest in ridding their departments of bad apples, particularly the ones that are giving them a bad name, because it's the same for every profession, all right? The same way all of us have vested interest in getting rid of the people who make our professions look bad or who make us look bad for association, we have a vested interest in getting rid of them. I believe that police officers feel the same way about their own bad apples. So, getting that out of the way, that being said, their failure is of a different kind. Now, I'm not an expert in other states, but at least in California, I know that politicians really seek out police endorsements because polls have shown that they really help sway voters. This means that you are helping elect the people responsible for making the laws that limit you from doing your job, which is to protect law-abiding citizens, and that's making the crime rates skyrocket in California. They're also the first people to throw you under the fucking bus when anything goes wrong. And you know why they're doing it, by the way? This is not a conspiracy theory. I guess I don't have any evidence for it, but logic says 1 + 1 = 2, you know? The reason why they're doing it is because labor unions pick the politicians that will give them the most power and the most lucrative deals, which, by the way, is the reason, the labor union deals is the reason why California, you know, the 4th greatest economy in the world, is bankrupt. And in turn, the unions donate generously to the politicians' political campaigns, or for the officials' political campaigns. And I'm talking donating millions. So it's a disgusting cycle that needs to stop now. Officers, you need to pay closer attention to what your union leaders are doing. If you're going to clean house, start cleaning up there with all those corrupt bastards who, by the way, are screwing you over, right? Stop supporting the people who are limiting your ability to do your sworn duty, which again is to protect the law-abiding citizens of this country, and who, by the way, are stabbing you in the back afterwards. So, let's move on to government. And what can I say about government? As I've mentioned before, I think government is terrible at everything. Now, this doesn't mean that they're not necessary to maintain a society, but overall, they suck at everything they do. A good example, the United States Postal Service. Which is better, Amazon or USPS? Amazon or UPS? I'm sorry, that was bad. That was USPS or UPS? FedEx or USPS? My point is, they do a job, but they're certainly not the best at it. And they're probably the worst at doing the same job as private companies. Anyway, that's just how I feel. But I won't get into all that right now. So I'll keep it specific. This is a failure of leadership. I want to keep it very specific because I can go on a rant and a tangent, and you've been with me before. The big issue here is that our political leaders have no spines. They're weak, small, petty cowards, and I talked a lot about this during the quarantine. Petty tyrants. People who have a little bit of extra power due to extraordinary circumstances and demand that everybody has to obey their rule, their God, right? Their God-given authority. And what happened because of this? Do you remember? Slowly but surely, because of all these petty tyrants and these unreasonable rules, we got a trickle of civil disobedience, right? People started protesting, and people just straight up started ignoring the lockdowns. They started going out. We're like, fuck you, we're not doing what you're saying. And what does this lead to? It leads to people losing respect in the authority of government. It leads to people losing trust in the idea that the government's actions are in our best interests. Add that to the fact that they have been releasing inmates from prisons like crazy. By the way, crazy coincidence that most of the cities that have seen riots are the cities that have been releasing prisoners from jail, right? Who would have thought that criminals commit crimes? It's crazy. And, even before that, the rolling back a law similar to the ones that I spoke of before, about making stealing anything under $950 a misdemeanor, that declared that low-level violations of law are not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And it's not a crime that they seek to pursue. You know what this leads to? More crimes of that type. You know what that leads to? More criminals. Because it turns out that when people think that they can get away with something, they will try to get away with it. Studies have shown time after time that the harshment of a punishment does very little to deter criminals. However, raising the probability of getting caught does. So telling cops not to police low-level crimes leads to a rise of low-level crimes. Shocker! The mayor of LA told officers not to arrest looters or rioters. They were letting them burn down the patrol cars. You can see videos of this, burning them down right in front of them. Didn't stop them. The mayor of New York did something very similar. The mayor of Minneapolis told their police department to abandon their police station, the one where, the cop who killed Floyd used to work, and they left it to the rioters to burn it down. It's weak, pathetic insanity. They are so afraid of being called the bad guys by the media that they're allowing themselves to be walked all over by criminals. It's pathetic. Their idiotic logic here is, if we let the police step in, then they'll have to subdue them with violence, and then people will protest police brutality more. So instead, let's just let them have their tantrum, and hopefully they'll get tired out before the damage is too great. It's insured anyway. Yeah, real fucking easy for you to say when they're not burning down your life's work. When it's not your family member who's getting beaten on the streets or killed. Real fucking easy. They care more about criminals not giving them bad PR than they do about protecting law-abiding citizens. I can't stress that enough. The citizens whom they get all their money from, by the way, because guess what? Criminals tend to not pay fucking taxes. So where does the pendulum go from here? After days of rioting and looting in our cities, after days of violence that imposed a curfew, just as we were coming out of the pandemic. After months of being locked down because of a pandemic. My guess is that people are pretty sick of all of this, and that the pendulum is going to swing really fucking hard the other way. And right now, what does that mean? Potentially, martial law. And the army stepping in. And people will probably be happy about it because fuck those guys who keep burning all our stuff. It also means a total complete distrust in our government, which will lead to people taking matters into their own hands. Anybody who runs as a law and order candidate and promises to be as hard and harsh on criminals as possible is likely going to win any election anywhere. So, honestly, keep a close eye on November. And don't forget the names of all the weak assholes who let us hanging out to dry in the middle of riots, instead of stepping in and doing their job, which, once again, is protecting the law-abiding citizens. Finally, what does this mean for society if things don't get fixed really fucking quickly? First off, like I said before, people don't believe the government will protect them, so now they'll have to start taking matters into their own hands. And as I'm saying this, there have been at least 2 reported cases of shop owners shooting and killing looters. One of them walked out scot-free because he did it in self-defense. I don't know about the other one. I didn't really look into it that far, and I believe no information is available yet. There are multiple videos of people running over rioters with their cars. Why? Because if you get surrounded by a bunch of crazy thugs hitting your cars with skateboards, your survival instinct is get the fuck out of there. Because why? We've seen the videos of them opening your doors up, pulling you out of your car, and stomping on you. All right? They don't want to risk getting pulled out of their cars and getting stomped on the streets. We've also seen the videos of shop owners getting attacked. Nobody wants to be fed to a mob. Check out the videos. They're out there. Old lady in New York getting beat up with a fucking ladder. A dude trying to defend his shop with a sword, which, by the way, is not a very smart idea. Honestly, I don't know if that guy's still alive. He got beaten with a skateboard and then stomped on the street. A guy waving a flag got punched and then got stomped on, and then the guy who tried to help him got punted in the head. That dude probably has some kind of brain damage. I don't know what happened to most of these people, but they're not 100% okay, and they were not protected by the people who are supposed to be protecting them. All right? Coincidentally, by the way, as the lockdowns are happening, a large amount of people, guess what they started doing? They started buying guns like crazy. So the percentage of the population that has guns has considerably gone up. In fact, if you haven't even looked into buying a gun right now, you're making a big mistake. Big mistake. Why? Because check your maps. The places where the riots are happening, coincidentally, are the places where the people are most against the Second Amendment. Why? Because you don't want to riot and loot a place where there's a chance that the store owner might be there waiting for you to defend his property with a fucking shotgun, all right? You don't want to go to that place. You go to the place where there's going to be a dude with the sword because you can take him out with a skateboard. That's where you want to go. Or a little old lady. That's where you want to go. So, get ready for support of the Second Amendment to go way, way up, and the stories of people shooting at rioters to go way up as well. By the way, on a side note, as far as the celebrities paying the bail for looters and rioters go, how fucking stupid can you be? You know what happens when looters and rioters get released from prison, right? With no consequences? They keep rioting and looting. Surprise! That's why they kept fucking going in the places where you keep letting them go. You don't have to be a genius to figure that one out, all right? Also, as a general fucking rule, don't support anything that you don't want to see happen in your own community. Don't support anyone that you don't want to see in your own fucking house. And I'm talking to all those people who were rooting and cheering for the rioters on, and then they were crying when they started looting their offices. Check out the story of Chris Palmer. He's actually an ESPN reporter or something, I don't know, basketball guy. And he literally cheered for them burning down affordable housing. And then he started crying and demanded that the police do something when the rioters showed up in his neighborhood. Guess what, buddy? You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. If you didn't want it to happen in your own house, don't support it happening on somebody else's. You fucking hypocrite. That's the worst part of it. You just want brownie points. You just want cool points. You're like, oh yeah, I supported you, blah, blah. No, you're a fucking asshole. You're a hypocrite. You don't support them. You just want the brownie points. You don't have the courage of your convictions. You're a fucking hypocrite. Be better. All of you, do better. And that can mean actively trying to do better. But sometimes, it can also just mean you're paying attention to what happens in your community and just not doing evil. Sometimes that's it. I know most of us want to quietly live our lives in peace. We're the passive majority, okay? We want to work. We want to provide for our families. We want to have a drink with friends, enjoy the beach, go on vacation every once in a while, and overall have a good time. Well, right now, all of our leaders have failed us. The people we trusted from every side to do right by us and uphold the peace that we value most of all are failing us. They're abusing the power given to them by us, and we need to hold them accountable for their actions. So remember their names. And I'm serious. Remember their names. Remember who was there for you when you needed them the most. Remember who left you hanging out to dry. It's the greatest power we have, and you can't let them take it away from you. You simply just because you weren't paying attention. Anyway, that's it for today. That's it for my rant today. Is any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can find me at Dario the Show on Instagram and at SuperDarioPeriodWorld. Also, on a side note, thank you for the ones who were worried about me yesterday. I had previously decided not to make an episode yesterday because I was doing a double shift. I was doing the restaurant. It was my first day actually doing a double shift, so I was like, all right, I'm going to take that day off. It coincided with everything going to shit, but, what can you do? As always, thank you for listening, and I'll see you again next time.